You ask, I answer. It's that simple. Leave it in the comments. Hi everyone and welcome to Saluso, and yes, today we have another Q&A episode. You guys sent me in your questions in the comments on my previous videos and I'm answering them on this. So let's get right into it. First question is coming from the Dubai expat. Shout out to Nico. Follow his channel if you want to know more about what the experience of looking for Rolexes is like, as well as picking up a lot of other cool watches and also just shopping around in Dubai. Dubai is an amazing city and it is another world when it comes to watches, so definitely make sure you check that out. And the Dubai expat asks, what will be the next watch you're going to buy if you have to choose now and calculating your budget? Which watch for 5K, 10K, 20K? Hope this counts as one question, but really curious what you would pick. Well, that's like 7 questions, but I don't care, I'll answer all of them. Me, normally, I actually tend to work backwards when it comes to choosing my next watch. I choose the watch first, see how much it costs, and then try and figure out how I'm going to afford it. That being said, though, I know not everyone thinks that way, and it's basic human nature to at least set somewhat of a budget before you start spending. And the next watch that I'm thinking seriously of buying does fit within one of your budget criteria, so I'll put that in the list. So I'm just going to breeze through options on new and pre-owned for each of these 3 price brackets that you've given me. And let's start out with the sub 5,000. So on the new market, I would say definitely sub 5,000, the new Tudor Royal. It's recently been announced for a worldwide release. I think for like the full day-date, two-tone, full size, you're still only paying like $3,000. If you get it in steel, it's a little bit less. ETA 2824 on the inside, so it's not a manufacturer caliber, but still, it's a great movement. It's going to be very reliable, very cheap to service, and it's a great looking watch. Harks back to the Rolex Oyster Quartz, but of course it's not a quartz. Integrated bracelet. It's something that's extremely versatile. I really think you can't go wrong spending less than 5,000 if you're trying to buy new. And that's before you consider discounts, of course, which I always advocate, unless you're buying one of those hot watches that sells for over retail on the gray market. Any new watch you buy, ask for a discount. And then as for the pre-owned side, under 5,000, I would recommend the Piguet Type 20. This is a watch that normally retails for about 8,000 or 9,000. It's been around since the mid-90s. And you can find examples of this flyback chronograph with a historic Le Mans movement on the inside. Very, very reliable as well from a company like Piguet, a company with so much history, with so much prestige, that makes watches that are at the level of Patek Philippe in some cases. Honestly, how can you go wrong spending less than $5,000 and getting that watch? You can get these for around $4,500 at the starting end. You might have to sacrifice getting the bracelet and get it on a leather strap, but still, it's amazing value for under $5,000. You get so much watch for your money. The finishing is still really nice. It's a flyback chronograph, like I said. You can get it with a date or without a date. You can get it in satin finish or in high polish. There's tons of options. And very importantly, it's still being made today, which means that serviceability isn't going to be an issue. The parts are still being made. I think that's a great way to spend $5,000, and that is a watch that I am also considering somewhat getting myself. Next, we have the $10,000 bracket, and this is going to be a double header because for both new and pre-owned, I recommend a JLC Reverso. On the new end, I'd say the Tribute Duo Face. That comes in at a retail of $10,300 US, which you can easily negotiate off, or if you're in a country where you can get the tax off when you travel, easy. You're within the bracket, and for that, again, you get a watch that's made by a company that has prestige, that has history, that's reliable, goes through the Master 1000 hours. It's an extremely well-built watch. You get 2 time zones, and it's completely different to the majority of watches that one sees. At the end of the day, rectangular watches are not that popular, so it means there's a great novelty and a great entry into high horology as well, because JLC, in my view, is one of the best watchmakers out there. On the pre-owned side, this is where it comes into one of the watches I'm looking at getting at next, and that is I'm looking at a JLC dual face in solid gold. These sell for around $7,000 or $8,000, so I'm going to be saving for at least another year. But for me, this will be the most expensive watch that I will have gotten in my collection so far, and I want to get something special, so being able to get it in gold also adds more variety to my collection. The dual face, I'm always looking at some way to have a GMT or a second time zone because I normally travel a lot, except during COVID. And yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about for quite some time. JLC has a sentimental value to me as well. So for me, that's where I'm looking at right now. But also there are tons of other reversals you can get in anywhere from 5 to 10,000 US on the pre-owned market. You can get ones with open case backs and triple dates like that Grand Reversal that I did a review of a few months ago. You can get the classic ones with just the plain case back. You can get precious metals. You can get two-tone ones. You can get ones on a bracelet. You can get ones with chronograph displays on the rear side as well if you're looking at like a Reversal Grand Sport. There's so much variety in the Reversal family. Between 5 to 10,000 US, you really cannot go wrong looking at some sort of Reversal, and it will be distinctive, well made, and a great watch. And always a novelty. You can always just flip around the watch and just have a little bit of fun with it. So definitely a great option, and that would be my recommendation, and answers your question as to what I'm thinking of getting next. Solid gold Reversal dual face from around sort of the 90s, early 2000s. Then 20,000. Now this is a huge bracket in my view. It's a bracket that I haven't personally played with very much. Unfortunately, I'm not at that stage yet economically, but there is so much that you can get. In terms of new, I'm actually going to undercut it by quite a lot. I'm going to recommend the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe on a bracelet. I've recommended this in a few of my other videos as well, just because I think it is so distinctive. On a technical front, it's advanced. It's got like 120 hours power reserve, silicone hairspring, it's anti-magnetic. It's beautifully finished. You get a solid gold rotor. Even though it's blacked out, they still made sure it was solid gold. They could have easily cheaped out and made it tungsten and just, it would have looked the same, but Blancpain doesn't cut corners like that. And then that bracelet is so incredibly distinctive. It's like nothing you will see on any other watch, and still 300 meters water resistant. It's not that thick, a little bit thicker than a Submariner, but it's like 13.5 millimeters, something like that. 43 millimeters, it doesn't wear that big. I think it's just an amazing watch, and if I had 20 grand to spend on a watch, that's probably where I would put my money if I had to buy new. Now in terms of pre-owned, again, the world opens up even more, and you have tons of options. But if I had to pick one, I would definitely recommend the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Chronograph Generation 2. This is probably the favorite chronograph of the Overseas collection because it has the newer shape and modern sizing, but it still has the big date, and it is available for under $20,000 in most cases, depending on dial and if you get bracelet, not bracelet. And you still get so much watch. For starters, it's part of the Holy Trinity. I mean, do I need to say more? Secondly, while yes, it's not an in-house movement, it is an Piguet 1185. It's been modified by Vacheron to have that big date. And again, it brings it back to the advantage of a third-party movement, which is reliability and cheaper repairs and more options for repairs as well. Then add to the fact that it is a stunning looking watch, still has 150 meters water resistance, it's anti-magnetic, it's amazingly finished. You will never get tired of looking at this watch and just seeing how it plays with the light. If you get it on the bracelet, again, a bracelet like no other brand is offering right now. Honestly, I think that is one of the best ways you can spend 20 grand or a bit less on the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Generation 2 chronograph. And for those of y'all that think of investment watches or value retention, these have been slightly creeping up over the last year or so that I've been looking at. So who knows if they're going to be in that sub $20,000 price bracket for long. So hopefully that answers your question. And honestly, if you want to ask me that question again in 3 months, you probably get a completely different answer, because I'm always looking for and trying to discover new watches, you know, new brands, new models. For me, that's the biggest fun of this hobby, is the discovery. So definitely ask it again in the future, you'll get a completely different answer. Next, we have Tiger Tooth CSGO, Seamaster or Submariner as first watch. Well, I will try my very best not to be biased, because I own a Seamaster and I faced that exact same decision when I was buying my first watch. So it's natural for people to gravitate towards the Submariner as their first luxury watch. Let's face it, when we go into this hobby, one of the watches that everyone knows, if they don't know anything about watches, is a Submariner. You go and you think, all right, Submariner, cool, let's start out with that. You go on the Rolex website, costs around 9,000 US. The new one is, I think, 9,500. So you think, cool, all right, save for $9,000, go in, and then, may I have my Submariner, please? I have the money. Oh no, sir, we have the wait list. Do you have any prior purchase history? No, it's your first watch. So right off the gate, your budget is gonna have to inflate to 10, 11, 12, $13,000, $14,000 if you're talking about the new one, Old ones, I haven't been paying too much attention on what their resale value is for the 116610, but still, you're paying much more than you had already bargained for. So in that, already you're spending more than you originally thought. But let's say hypothetically you can. Comparing the current Seamaster to the recently discontinued Submariner 16610 LN. For starters, in the Seamaster, you can choose between black or blue. With the Submariner, your choices are black or green. If you don't like green like me, then already you're limited by options. Secondly, if you do like green, you're going to be paying even more just for a color change. And then you compare them on the inside, there's no competition. The 3135 is a movement that started its life in 1988. It hasn't pushed the boundaries further since then. Meanwhile, the current Seamaster is equipped with a caliber 8800. It's METAS certified, anti-magnetic. You can actually see it. It's well decorated, silicone hairspring. The list goes on. You know, on a technical front, it definitely beats it out. What I will say is that the Submariner does play a bit more as an all-rounder compared to the current Seamaster, because in my view, the current Seamaster has gone a little bit too sporty in my view. But apart from that, I'd say there's no contest. Then if you compare it to the new Submariner, again, those are starting, I think, on pre-owned around 14,000 US. And that's pretty much the only way you can get them, because if it's your first watch, you have no purchase history. You have no leverage in that sense to get it at retail. So coming back again to comparing them, while yes, the new Submariner does feature a 70-hour power reserve, that's really the only technical advantage it has versus the 8800. Apart from that, they're pretty much neck and neck, I would say, in terms of accuracy, anti-magnetism, etc. But again, you're looking at something that's now worth the price of, what, 3 Seamasters? Think of all the different options you could have. Think of all the options you could have then if you expand it beyond just the Seamaster. I did an entire video on Submariner alternatives that are less than the price of a gray market one. And also, if you're getting this as your first watch, instead of spending the $9,000 you originally budgeted because you thought you could buy it as new, now you have plenty of extra money to save for your next watch or to spend on another watch and experiment. I think within this hobby, you don't want to start out too hot because you don't know what you like yet. That's something I discovered with my tutor. I discovered that for me, thickness is a huge priority. Screw-down pushers mean I'm not going to use a chronograph. All these lessons, at the end of the day, they cost money. Not everyone has a YouTube channel like me that they can test out watches more than they can in the store to be able to know what they really want. Ownership is probably the best way to learn what you want. So you don't want to spend your whole budget or 1.5 times multiply it on your first watch if you don't even know if you're going to like it yet. But for what the realistic price of a Submariner is, be it the 116610 or the 126610, in my view, at least the Seamaster is the much better option, especially as a first watch. Now, Mastermind Manager asks, what do you think about the MB 119926? This is the Heritage Perpetual. Specifically, it was a limited edition launched in SIHH in 2019. Limited edition of 100 pieces. It's a perpetual calendar with a GMT function. All of them have been sold out, so it's only available on the pre-owned market. Currently sells for around 20 to 25,000 US. Rose gold, and the caliber on the inside, Montblanc calls it a manufacturer caliber, but really it's based on the Cartier 1904 PS. So first off, talking about Montblanc and their manufacturer calibers. Montblanc does have its own caliber manufacturer called Minerva. They make very specific watches. They're extremely high quality, amazingly decorated, vintage inspired movements, and they normally sell for around like 20, 30,000 US retail. And I haven't seen enough of them on the pre-owned market to gauge what like value retention is or anything like that. That's one segment. Then you have the other segment that Montblanc still calls manufacturer. Think of things like the Time Walker manufacturer. They call that manufacturer, but really it's based on an IWC movement. So much better and more prestigious than, say, an ETA, but let's call a spade, it's an IWC movement. Same thing with this. While yes, Cartier, IWC, they are all part of the same Richemont group, I don't know whether that's really manufactured. But that's purely from, the marketing standpoint. From a movement standpoint, they're extremely good quality movements. You need to consider that the same Cartier manufacturer also makes the movement inside the Vacheron Constantin 56. So if that manufacturer is good enough for Vacheron Constantin, you're looking at some serious value inside a Montblanc. And the big advantage to Montblanc in them doing this practice is that you're no longer paying for brands. You're paying for the movement. You're paying for the design of the watch. You're paying for the complications. This is a perpetual calendar with a GMT. How many of those do you find? I think this is an amazing value watch, especially if you like the look. I think Montblanc has been doing a great job evolving their sort of very simple, clean dial look. I think a few years ago they looked a little bit cheap when they were doing that sort of aesthetic, but I think now they've really nailed it. They've gotten some good textures going on. The fonts are more and more attractive. So I think this definitely is a good option. I mean, you do need to weigh it against the fact that on the pre-owned market, you're starting to get in the territory. If you're spending 20, 25,000 US, you can start looking at things like a JLC Perpetual Calendar in rose gold, which, yes, the JLC holds more brand equity and a lot more heritage in terms of the brand as well as the movement. But also something like this Montblanc, again, it's 100 pieces. You don't see too many Montblancs. If you're after exclusivity and differentiation, you might want to go with the Montblanc. And the GMT function, again, that's something that's useful from a day to day. If it's something that tells you the right date every single day of the year, you never have to change it, and it tells you a second time zone, suddenly this becomes a practical watch to a degree, as well as being an interesting watch, as well as being a well-made watch, as well as being a watch that has some horological clout to it. So I definitely think this is a very good watch, and within the right frame of mind, I think it can represent great value as well. Also, one thing I didn't mention before, it does have a front and back perpetual calendar, which is very, very useful, because on a lot of perpetual calendars, if you fuck up when you're setting the date, bad luck. You need to wait till you get to that date. So another good feature as well. Next, we have a question from Chua Yuchai. I hope I pronounced that right, but I'm pretty certain I didn't. Hi Shah, what is your opinion on the notion that Rolex and or their ADs don't like flippers and the gray market? Keep hearing other YouTubers implying that Rolex is trying very hard to find ways to stop flippers so that their hyped watches won't end up on the gray market, thus conducting a premium, etc. I personally think that Rolex and their ADs are complicit in making this happening, so their branding and false hype is created. Rolex and their ADs survive through the sales of their other less popular Rolex models, and in the case of ADs, the other brands that they carry too. If indeed Rolex intended to kill flippers in the gray market, they could have easily done so by producing enough of those popular models, but they wouldn't do it just as this hype kept the masses aspiring to own a Rolex, even though they are not the popular model. I hope you see my point and would love to hear your thoughts, as other YouTubers seem reluctant to take on this question, on which they only point to possibly their own confusion. Further signs Rolex is helping their brand hype is they are reluctant to reinstate the Rolex Lost and Stolen Watches Register, coupled with a few new sport watches I've seen on the gray market that doesn't even have the buyer's name on the warranty cards, for example. However, there were recent practices adopted by the AD to remove watch stickers, apparently instructed by Rolex HQ, especially the QR code, but this really does not in any way help those new watches being flipped. Some YouTubers even suggested that Rolex is trying to be the next PP or AP by making their watches sought after and hence commanding a premium retail pricing to reap the benefit. But in reality, although they wish they really will keep trying, Rolex can never be like Patek Philippe, and basically, as their relatively basic complication watches are mass-produced close to 1 million per year, Patek Philippe's less than 10% of what Rolex produces. Rolex also rely heavily on selling their precious metal watches, as I believe the margin is astronomical. I think that was a typo for economical, as they have their own foundry facilities, hence suppressing the production of steel and sport watches to fuel the sales of the precious metal watches. In short, Rolex have created a marketplace where they are able to dictate the market by taking advantage of human weaknesses of wanting what they cannot have. We have reached a stage where Rolex can produce just about anything by placing the famous coronet on it and will sell at a premium. So, a lot to digest. Main summaries of your question: is Rolex really trying to chase down the hype from flippers? No reinstatement of the lost and found, warranty cards without names, ADs removing stickers. Is Rolex trying to be the next Patek Philippe or Audemars Piguet? So a lot to digest. I'll actually start from the end. Is Rolex trying to be the next Patek Philippe or Audemars Piguet? No, that's not their business model at all. I don't think that's what they're aiming for. And if you look at the collections overall, I would say that Rolex, a higher percentage of its collection is sold at a premium versus Patek Philippe or Audemars Piguet. So in that sense, I feel the aspiration would actually go in reverse. I think Audemars Piguet and Patek Philippe would want to try and achieve what Rolex is doing in terms of that premium gray market stuff. Patek Philippe obviously has the Nautilus and Aquanaut that achieve that, but some of its other watches don't achieve that. It still has high demand for a lot of its watches because of the brand that it is. But at the end of the day, it's two model lines that really cover that. Same thing with Audemars. You have the Royal Oak and some Royal Oak offshores. It's not across the board. Secondly, yes, all manufacturers prefer to sell their precious metal ones because that's where they make the biggest margin. That's not something exclusive to Rolex. Is Rolex in a position where they can put the crown on any model and it'll sell well? No. Look at the Cellinis. Those sell at a discount. Presidents. Think of all the watches that people suggest you buy in order to get in the good graces of your AD. Those all have Rolex crowns on them and they don't sell at a premium. They'll sell at a discount, or what most ADs do is they're used as leverage to get these high demand models. So Rolex isn't infallible either. Then moving on to some of these practices. As for the reinstatement of the Rolex Lost and Found, I don't know necessarily how much that will help with this whole gray market thing. I think the hype is its own sort of self-sustaining cycle. But I will say, do check out the Paul Thorpe channel. He talks at length about the impact of not having the Rolex Lost and Found register instated. I don't know enough about the subject to answer it with any authority, so that's why I would refer you to him, because he has dedicated a lot of videos, a lot of content around this issue and around the issue of watch theft. So I would definitely recommend you watch that channel to find a lot more detailed info, because he can give better info than I can. One thing to bear in mind when we're talking about things like the warranty cards without names, ADs removing stickers, the stories of ADs chasing down people who end up being flippers. One very important thing to bear in mind is that the majority of Rolex authorized dealers are not owned by Rolex. So by that nature, that's why there's so little consistency across the board. That's perhaps why you're getting the impression that YouTubers are maybe confused. It's because there's no consistency. Different Rolex ADs have different practices because Rolex doesn't actually exert that much active control. And that's why you have so much disparity between what different authorized dealers will do. They have different thresholds of what you need to do to get an in-demand model. Some of them, probably not that many anymore, will still work on first come, first served. Others will make you buy other watches. Others will just make you wait for years and years, but eventually call you when they feel like it. There's so much inconsistency, and that's due to the fact that Rolex doesn't own a lot of these boutiques, so they don't really manage what happens. Rolex is fundamentally a wholesale operation. What makes Rolex money is selling to the ADs. Once they've done that, it's really in the AD's hands what they do. So things like removing stickers, yeah, it's a token effort, but it doesn't really change the market. Even things like chasing down flippers, I think that the only thing Rolex can really do if they genuinely wanted to normalize things a little bit would be to increase production. At the end of the day, it's us as consumers that hold the most power in getting rid of this hype bullshit. And that is purely by buying other watches, by not buying into the hype. Gray market dealers see people stop paying insane premiums, price goes down. Then the hype and the rumors start flowing. It's an entire process, but at the end of the day, it starts, I think, more with the consumers than with the brands. 10, 15 years ago, a Nautilus wasn't selling over retail. Now it's selling at like nearly 3x. It's fucking insane. But as long as people keep buying it, those prices will keep going up. So hopefully that answers your question. But at the core, is Rolex really trying to do things? I think they are, but also their business model means they can't exert that much control over their boutiques and dealers to really consistently make a shift on the selling side. So I think if we ever see a change in this, it's going to be by the market, not by the actual brands, not by the actual sellers even. So that's it for questions today. This was a little bit of a long one, but hopefully I answered all of your questions. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments of this video, as well as any other video I put up. I do collect, some of these are actually from other non-Q&A related videos, so make sure that you always put your questions if you have them so they can be featured in a future Q&A episode. I think I'm getting to the point where I can do one of these every month, which is great. So I really appreciate that. If you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures of watches as well as the infographics that I use throughout all my videos, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. And of course, if you want to keep seeing new watch videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you know when the next video comes up. In any case, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.